Hey folks, it's that time of the month again for our February Developer Roundtable, and I have the man himself, the one and only senior environment artist Jimmy Tourke with me to discuss all things environment and well building. How you going, Jimmy?
Hey, yeah, I'm doing great. Excited to talk about some cool stuff today.
Good stuff, man. Good to have you on board. So, as per usual, we're going to go through the list of predefined questions that you guys have put in for us, our VIPs. And to start things off, as per usual, we're not going to say names, but we will go through. So the first question is, it's kind of like a threefold question. When designing a new area of the world, what's the general thought process like? What factors play into the decisions you make around things like the landscape or flora and other objects, and where do you draw inspiration from when you're presented with a new place to create? There's lots to answer there.
It's a small little guy. So what's the general thought process like? Well, in any given area, there's kind of some objectives that you're trying to reach, and you know, the primary objective of a game should be the gameplay. You know, like, what is the game? But the other objective is like the story of the place that the game exists. And so whenever we start like a new zone or something like that, we're starting with those two, the lore and the gameplay. And from there, it's a whole bunch of iteration, but that's certainly the beginning.
Yeah, nice, man. So just kind of build on top as you kind of go along.
Yeah, I mean, there's a massive like pipeline, and it takes a lot of steps. But you know, just to give you the idea is that there's a world building, gray boxing, placement of items that then correlate to the gameplay that would be required, and then there's a huge art pipeline that requires a lot of steps. And then the core of it, though, really is that when you're doing that lore and that gameplay at the very beginning through the gray box iteration phase, what you're really doing is sedimenting in how you want that place to feel. Now, it might not look pretty, it might not be whatever, but it's the gameplay that is required for that area. And that's what, when we talk about PA, like, that's what you're here to test, is to make sure that the game is balanced and solid. So yeah, that's kind of, I guess that's probably the part that they all care about the most, is what.
Absolutely. And so where do you draw inspiration from when you're presented with a new place to create?
Well, so, history repeats itself in games, oftentimes when they don't look outward enough. We draw a lot of our references from real world examples of like terrain and environments, and like Disney does the same stuff. If you ever seen any of their behind the scenes, they literally, like, for Frozen, they went on location and went to all these like Nordic places, and you fully submerge yourself into the ideas of that place. And I'll create like this reference board that has 1 million images on it, and organize them in little crazy ways. And yeah, I mean, but that's real world reference. You would also gather, or I would gather, art that current people are making. Like, what are the current methods of making something like Rainbow Six Wildlands or Horizon? Like, how are they doing it? And then I would also look at games of the same genre. Like, at one point I asked the forum for a post on everybody's favorite MMOs, and like, what were some of their coolest areas. And through that, I was given a lot of really amazing images. So I'll, when I'm looking through a new area, I'm referencing other games that have done areas like that as well. So
yeah, nice, man. So when you need to do like a desert area, they send you on the Visionary Realms private jet down to Australia. We can hang out, have a few beers, and go and search the environment and find some good locations for you.
They did that for Battlefront 2 as well. Like, they actually went to these ice caves in in Iceland, these like really beautiful ice caves, and they photographed it in order to replicate that whole thing. They photo scanned it, and then they took photo reference to make sure that they matched it, and then they used that for like the Hoth environment. But
yeah, nice. That's awesome.
it's crazy. Yeah, like going on location, getting the real world examples, that's such a big deal.
Wow. Okay, so what is the most fun / satisfying part of working on an area or zone for you?
Well, I honestly love like making pipelines and like doing the crazy, like weird technical mess of nodes that create something. But at the end of the day, I just love like sculpting. I think the sculpting process in ZBrush is my favorite part of everything.
Yeah, nice. Get those creative juices flowing.
Yeah, it's just simpler. You can kind of focus on it, and you don't have to worry about technical things. You just got to make this look cool based on the pictures you have in front of you.
Yeah, nice. All right, so this is based on a question over your foliage coverage back in October. Question was, what did you mean by use of holistic systems makes it easier to art direct the creation of biome looks, as in like Horizon Zero Dawn, and is much of it done algorithmically these days with auto optimization?
And thanks, Mushy, by the way. So when I was talking about holistic systems in that context, I was specifically referring to the fact that you can have a frond or a tree branch that has leaves, and then you could change literally the leaf on the ends of you could change all the leaves like immediately. You can change the entire leaf that's being spawned on there. And is it procedurally? Yeah, you can totally go about it a procedural route, and that's not always a bad thing. But for a lot of usually people will have a procedural start, and then they'll hand model it or modify it to fit their needs, and that's the case for those branches that were in there. I had something that started off some way, and then I brought it to where I really wanted it to be. But and that goes with the leaves. Like all those leaves were like, they started off in a semi-procedural way, but then I hand placed every leaf on the frond. And you do it through like a fast way of, modifying them. It's not like you're, but yeah, you totally are.
So along that same line, are we mainly using pre-existing Unity assets to build environments, or constantly creating from scratch?
Yeah, I love that question. No, we're not using Unity Store assets. I guess you could say that there are plugins that we've stolen from, like you buy a code, you buy code and then you modify it. Not stolen.
Borrowed, not stolen,
plugins. Borrowed. yeah. Within legal, precedent, whatever. But like for Unity assets of like art assets, like that's something different where most things aren't made to the quality standards which we need to operate within. And then even if they are made to those standards, they're not going to be able to be rendered at the speed and the method that we're doing it at. Like textures are packed a certain way. If you think of like a human face, for instance, there's like, 4 textures minimum usually that would describe how that face renders and looks in a game. Think about buying a whole set of humans in all of their armor. Now all of that renders a completely different way than how you're rendering, and everything's gotten slow. Well, that's the case for any time that you do Unity Asset Store stuff, because it's just not made to work together necessarily.
Yeah.
Some of them are like HD render pipeline or the other one, lightweight, I think they call it. But even still, a lot of people make their own shaders, and it just becomes this whole thing. And I was actually really happy in the Coast stream to state that all that stuff was handmade. You make it handmade so that you can modify it later on down the line, and that gives major gains on final performance and iteration time. But
absolutely, which we know is very critical. So, next question. What are some other hero pieces that you are looking forward to designing next?
Ooh. Well, I would first off say that all that stuff is initially concocted by Jared and Justin. I'm not like, oh, I want a statue right here, and I want it to be an archive. Like that's really being driven from them and what they want to see in a zone. And then we talk about set dressing. But anyways, what asset specifically would I like to work on? I'd really like to sculpt a whole bunch of rocks for this new area.
Yeah, nice.
I'm really trying to like pull myself back, but that one is going to be fun. I looked at a bunch of new techniques on how people are making their rocks, and it's always fun to try a little bit of something new as you're doing something that you've done before. And it's just like iterating on that skill, that process,
And rocks are cool and they look hard. People, they don't give rocks enough credit.
Yeah, I actually I got to go to this one thing where the guy who sculpted all the rocks for God of War 4, or is it 3? It's 4, right? The newest one? 4? Whatever.
I actually don't know. I
bet everybody knows. Some people are typing. They don't know. Anyway, it's God of War 4. He was talking about just how that's what he did for like 2 years, is he sculpted rocks for God of War.
Yeah, wow.
And his whole like Sony's a big company. This guy sculpted rocks for 2 years, but yeah, there's a lot to it to make it look really good.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so this is a big couple of questions, but we'll try to break it down a little bit. We haven't seen or heard anything about South Soul, the Tower of the Reckless Magician, or Wild's End since they were teased or shown, a few years ago. Likewise, the Steps of Rulan were discussed as being built a few years ago. Is there any new information or status update on those zones, including their lore, feel, art, etc., that we can share?
Just looking for some beans here, huh?
Yeah, they're fishing.
Yeah, fishing. No, it's good. So one thing I can say is that this is a really like long project. It's been like 6 years, like technically. How many years has it been that that Pantheon's been under development? Is it 6?
It's been a few, but we did a full-scale redevelopment, like a restructure. So
yeah, okay.
Game.
I don't know when people count.
I would count from there. I usually say from there, so about 4 to 5.
Word. Yeah. So there's like a million things that have happened over the course of this project, and so therefore, there's been versions of things that have existed. Now, are they a final version, or are they a version that was iterated on in order to create a blueprint for what we could gray box or do gameplay? That's dependent on each zone individually, but yeah, I mean, I'm not going to talk about any of the other zones because that's not been discussed through Ben or CV. But I will say that it's not like things get lost ever, and if they've been done, they're done, and they're in the project in whatever state they're in, and so take that how it is. Like with the gray boxing that we do, you're replacing assets, locations in their final form. So like when we talk about me placing a cube and that's a rock cube, well, when I come back and I have that rock, it just auto populates. So there's that as well to be considered when we talk about that stuff. Yeah.
And look, we have shown off those zones previously in streams and stuff, and as you said, they're not gone or forgotten. They may go through revamps, they may be changed slightly.
I mean, when I first got on the project like nearly 2 years ago, I went through every zone that was there when I got there, and like it's a repository.
Oh yeah,
you could say.
Yeah, there's a few from like way back that are just crazy. If you compare what we did back then to what we do now, it's mind-blowingly, the difference is just incredible. But we will show them off as they are ready. We've got some fantastic zones coming up too, and obviously Project Firthal was our big one that we've just released. So on that, big kudos to the recent co-stream from the guys. They really loved that. And I know the community overall was just, absolutely.
That was fun. I've never done anything like that. That was like a crazy experience for me.
Those streams are fun, man. I miss them.
Right?
I've been in one for a while, but they are.
He was super nice too, just saying.
Yeah, Ko's a cool dude. Very cool dude. He genuinely loves the game too, so it's really good to see how he reacts to it. Good sense of how Terminus feels and how different it is. Firthal and the Island of Infinite Storms were really great to see. This isn't just a zone art necessarily, it also includes how the zone combines with flora, fauna, environment, so the total package. He's saying how they got goosebumps from that, seeing how you have, and the team set it all up. So that's really good feedback. I just wanted to read that out.
Yeah, that's awesome.
All right, so we'll pop down to another question. Okay, so I know it's somewhat difficult, but I'd really like some insight into the timescales involved in building a zone. So this is a massive open-ended question because all zones are different and have different processes, but say generalizing a typical zone or one we've kind of worked on more recently, I think would probably be something we could talk a little bit about.
Well, yeah, it kind of also comes down to manpower, really, at the end of the day. There's like 3 phases in a zone, I guess you could think of in a very broad way. There's like the conceptual, what is it? There's the, what does it look like? All those things, the gameplay element, and then the finaling element. So there's kind of like 3 pieces to that puzzle. And different pieces of that are affected more by manpower versus, like lower manpower. So concept can be a little bit of a quicker thing with more people, but gameplay takes, gameplay can iterate, and having more people all the time doesn't always help. If you have to develop a system, if you have to develop a tool that didn't exist before, there's a lot of factors that go into the actual implementation of the idea and the design. And then the final part of that, which is significantly affected by manpower, would be the actual art implementation of all of that stuff. And then you could also say the finalization of the coding processes of the tools which were needed in the gameplay portion. You could like 2-piece that part.
Yeah, I get you.
But it's really hard to give an answer to that. It totally depends on the scope of the zone, scope of the gameplay, and then the amount of artwork. For us, we have a number internally that we're aiming for, but that's it's hard to say that to y'all.
Business, yes.
Yeah.
Business, but
I don't think I can say that one.
And touching on that, I wanted you to answer in that way too, just so the guys could hear it. But also touching on something I said back in last Dev Roundtable with CP with Jopper about funding and about investors, and I touched on individual people's companies. That's exactly what I meant. Like, I know the community took that and kind of ran with it a little bit, but it was essentially manpower. Like, investment for us is more manpower. It's essentially more resources. It will allow us to
be huge,
continue the same great quality, but at a faster pace with more people, more resources, and things like that. So that's all I meant by it. It wasn't anything to look into, but yeah. So I was hoping that you would set me up to answer that with your response. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, there's also something to be said for like lower, less cooks in the kitchen, so that you can just get it done.
Yeah,
and so that's one thing we've profited from significantly, just because of everyone being so capable of working, even when we're not. I'm not talking to you every day. I'm not talking to CP 4 times a day type deal. We're able to operate, and everybody's determined enough to keep going when heads are down.
That's exactly right, man. It definitely has its benefits, and even working remotely too. Like, we still work so well together, and we can be completely opposite sides of the world, where I'm working my butt off while you're sound asleep, and vice versa. Like, it's crazy. It's crazy how we get that to work, but it's great.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's so funny how Bruno Jared and I like will work to get our time schedules to match up perfectly so we can get work done.
Yeah.
But it just works out, like this is how working from home is, and you schedule your time so that you can be as effective as you can be.
Exactly. All right, so next question. We want to go on to the art style seems to be fantastic yet grounded. The armor styles look impressive yet realistic. I'm liking this, a very good mix of compromise. Is there an overall guiding ethos to the art style, and can we expect the style ongoing to be likewise tempered and not bizarre, ostentatious, or over the top as many other games started to become?
I wonder which games they're referring to.
Yeah.
Because bizarre can be interpreted so many different ways. I mean, when like Mists of Pandaria came out, like that was totally different for WoW. Like that was a fully different art scale or art style. But then you could consider like Black Desert Online, which is totally different, or like Terra or any of those others.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly an art style that we're working towards. We've like classified it internally, and we're working to maintain it. But the broader version of its description would just be high fantasy, and I think that there's a lot of stuff that goes into that. You look at Lord of the Rings, like the high fantasy, right? Lord of the Rings kind of defines the genre a little bit. They still have fantastical, bizarre stuff in there, but it feels grounded. And I think that that's what we're aiming for a little bit. A little bit believable in terms of this being real, but still fantastical. And, I don't want to go to a place that's just like outside.
Yeah, I know. That's it. And it's our version of it too. So we incorporate our lore and our worlds and stuff as well. So it comes down to our imagination and creativity. So I think that's what makes it kind of unique. We're not just copying some other game or art style. We're kind of keeping it real to our own.
Yeah, and like Jared's just a monster, man. He's just a beast.
Absolutely, agreed.
He busts out the coolest concepts. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. He's doing some fantastic work. Some of those art.
I just got to see some new stuff today. It was great.
I haven't seen that yet, so I'm going to be hitting him up. But some of those slides he's put up and the concept stuff is just mind blowing. Like he's really got a good eye for that kind of stuff. All right, so jumping on to the next one. Talking about mechanics using grey boxing before moving on to detail. How often are we finding, though, that once artistic detail is added, mechanics and gameplay need to be adjusted due to the change in feel?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm gonna preface with sometimes that can always happen. But what was cool about the Coast stream was we kind of proved that it doesn't always happen. Like, I'll give it to you. It sometimes will happen in a zone after you finalize all your assets. Like, sure, there might be things that change, but our most recent thing that we showed you, actually, it wasn't changing. We had a very clear pipeline and idea in our minds. We stuck to it for Isle of Infinite Storms.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty proud of that shot, the time lapse shot that we released.
That was amazing, man. That looked really good. To show what it started as to where it finished up was incredible.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks. It's been fun. I don't know.
Well, that's following up this next question. It's what zone has been the most challenging to make so far, and what zone would you like to hang out in the most?
Well, yeah, like I was remembering that this question was coming up, and I had been thinking about this. I would say Fairtale is the most fun because it's become so multifaceted for me. For Oldwood, like on the stream, I was chilling on the side, camera left or whatever. Like I'm outside the frame, hanging out, and it's very common for me to run the zone in the morning, especially when like Tim and I are iterating, in the Merc, like we were hitting each other up every day. We'd run it before we met each other, and it was just a constant thing. So, Fairthale kind of being in that same realm. I'd just say Fairthale as a whole.
Yeah, sweet. And speaking of Fairthale, has all of Fairthale been grey boxed at this point? What percentage of Project Fairthale is complete? I don't think we can give an actual percentage.
Sorry, did you say a question? I didn't hear something. I don't know. I don't think I can speak to that. Sorry, guys.
Good answer. So, Jimmy, run us through your thought design process on creating a zone focusing on things like when do you determine what NPCs will inhabit that zone, how and when do you determine what building will be there, the process of the number of PCs or points of interest, etc.
Yeah, so NPCs are definitely not my realm, but I do deal with them. You know what I mean? Like I've got to be like, okay, these guys, there's going to be some guys in here. Oh, got to prepare enough beds. Sorry.
That's it.
No, so like buildings, NPC population, we're immediately thinking about that, and specifically the gray box phase, especially when we're starting to bring it out. If there's a building that has a certain amount of NPCs, we want to make sure that it's big enough to contain those NPCs or contain that fight, that boss fight, that whatever. It's right at the start. Now, when do NPCs get populated? We've actually done a myriad of different methods for this before. We've had, depending on how the population system was going at the time, we actually had planes. Like I like put a texture on a plane and it represented the placeholder art for that monster, and then we put those everywhere just so we could envision it. But it just depends on where we're at, where game design is at, if they have time to work on this stuff. That was actually fun when we did that. That was kind of crazy.
Nice, man. So, lastly, but most importantly, how do you know if a zone is large enough? I think we judge that by a multitude of factors too. Like it comes down to, not only the lore and NPCs and environment and that in there, but also, what story we're telling and what the zone is, needs to kind of, the message it needs to kind of portray. Some zones, like, dungeons and stuff can be, bigger or smaller depending on how we set them up.
Yeah, I mean, it comes really back down to the gameplay. Like, what in the world is needed right now, and is it needed in this location? Like, do we need a level 40 to 50 dungeon that has this amount of loot? Therefore, like, what's going down?
Yeah.
We might repurpose something somewhere else. You might say I have a gap in leveling or items or whatever, and then use something from lore and place it into that location potentially. But I don't know.
There's not really a definitive answer. We don't really,
repurpose the scar. That's what we're gonna do.
As monsters. That'll go down well. But yeah, for the zone large enough, it just depends on the zone and the message we're trying to, the story we're trying to tell in that area.
I mean, yeah, like, do you want it to support 200 players? Like, do you want it to support 8 groups or something? And do they all need to have a merchant nearby? And like, you've got to really see NPCs in the space, and then not theoretically, but place in placeholder mobs everywhere in order to feel the real space. Because it's so funny. We were actually looking at concept today, and there were, like, in some of the concept designs there weren't player characters in it, so you could know scale. That's so important in knowing how big a zone needs to be. You need to actually see the player characters or the bears or whatever, the gas bats.
Yeah. Right,
that allows you.
Yeah, sorry, go, man.
No, I was just saying that's what it does.
Yeah, absolutely. I think having the player characters in there is really important too, just to see the scope against everything else, size of the world. And that takes us on to the next question, which is for far too long, MMO worlds have felt somewhat fake due to scale. So when designing areas, can we expect the scale of the environment to match the builders or inhabitants? For example, a dungeon made by smaller creatures like goblins having claustrophobic tunnels and generally smaller rooms, or a blind race having, pitch black hallways and tunnels with no lighting. Hopefully there's a shrink spell, etc., to get around with stuff like that. But are we kind of taking things like that into account?
Oh man, I love this question. Totally, we are totally taking stuff like this into the account. Like a gnome or a ratkin or whatever you want is not going to live in the same house that an ogre would. Thinking about like doors and steps are kind of like building blocks to an area. Like how tall are their steps, how big are their doors. That then defines kind of your space within the buildings. We kind of want the ogre to have a little bit of a harder time in a gnome or a dwarf's location than vice versa.
Absolutely, make them crouch and go on a crash diet. And
that was a cool question as well, because he goes on to like talk about the claustrophobia. I think didn't he say something about that? And it getting dark.
Yeah, goblins having claustrophobic tunnels and really small rooms, or a blind race having pitch black hallways and tunnels with no lighting.
I mean, it's not just it's a PvE game,
That's it, exactly. Take that, little bean. All right, so second question, same person. The law of Pantheon Terminus kind of frees up just about anything to be possible due to the different environments with, the worlds crashing together and colliding, existing next to or even within one another. Can you speak of any ways this has allowed your creativity to really run wild, and what led to within the game world of something design? Pretty crazy.
Yeah.
More fishing for beans, but whatever you can talk about. They're great fishes.
Well, I guess the easiest way to say it would be there's a lot more options on ways you can blend terrain, topography, stuff like that. You have a lot more. You're able to use a lot more real world examples, I guess. It's kind of a hard question to answer. There's many.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's without being able to go into details and spill beans. If this was a bean stream, we could talk about that for a long time, but unfortunately...
that should be a thing.
The
2020 bean stream.
I won't be able to host it, though, because I've got the nickname Beankeeper, so I'm not allowed to release any beans. So someone will have to do a guest host and take over and just run wild, and then I'll come back on the next month. We'll have to run that by Chopper and Ben. We'll see. I can't see that.
Well, he's here. I'm sure he'll...
I'm sure he's just shaking his head going no.
Yep.
All right, so I don't know how much we can answer this one too, but how many zones have been created and or started, and how many are planned? So we did a long time ago say we wanted a certain amount of zones. I don't know how strictly we're keeping to that number, but yeah, we can't really give out.
I'm not saying anything on this.
Yeah. That's good, man.
That water's too hot. I'm not gonna jump in that.
It is. We want the world to be, to feel lived in, but not too overcrowded. We also, with performance and things like that, so servers and all.
I mean, yeah, like you've got to remember that there's big things that we want to do in this game, so it's not gonna be like a small game by any means. So I will say that.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously more can get added as time goes on, so even when the game's released, it can still expand and get bigger and bigger.
Yep.
Alright, so there have been many times in the past with games where I find myself falling through the world or stuck in or under the terrain. Can you explain to the community what you are doing to ensure that does not happen? That's funny.
Well, what that experience is like a breakdown in the collision of the actual terrain, and it's like two different things that kind of result in that. It'd be the server not picking you up and getting or like maybe your client getting desynced with the server's collision, but the only way that would really be a problem would be is if it never picked you up and respawned you, and that wasn't like alerted. One cool thing about the way that one of the things that we're working on is that sort of collision will be, if that were to happen, then that sort of issue will happen in far fewer places than it would have previously, in a much smaller tiled format, where it might be this area but not the other areas over there.
Yeah,
so,
nice. I remember
actually
even
surprisingly. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
The guys have done a great job. Like, I had to use GM powers to fly through the world to be able to get down to those spots. So they've actually done really well. And jumping off the edges of the worlds and stuff like that. So yeah, you guys have done a great job. If I got to use dev hacks to get through walls and the ground, then I know you've done a good job.
Yeah, and you have to like turn because it's curved.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm just kidding.
All right, so can we share any information?
Flat terminus theory? I don't know.
Can we share any information on how Cyrene's Rest will be built and what kind of water interactions players can expect to have there?
Nope, can't talk about it. Sorry. I will say that water and swimming and rebreathing or having the ability to breathe underwater at times.
Yeah, good stuff. We will release more on water too. Like as they would have seen in the coast stream, water wasn't quite finished in that area. It's not a high priority, but it will be when we go into the next phase of testing and we start to ramp things up. So there will be water stuff. We'll probably focus a stream or something on it too when we get to that part.
But also in the grand scheme of things, like water matters, but for right this second, for PA5, like what we're talking, like where we're headed, in terms of priorities, water is pretty low. Y'all wouldn't want us to be focusing on that right now. You actually want us to be focusing on systems, level of evenness and just. You want the gameplay to be worked on, so it's not a bad thing.
That's it. Systems, features, functionality. Get it all working first before we make all the pretty stuff and the water flowing and activities.
Polish it. Yep. Let's get everything working all nice.
Absolutely. So this question is kind of linked back to naming conventions for the races, which Justin did quite a while ago. So he's asking if it's changed. I don't really think we can answer too much of that.
I couldn't speak on that one.
It's a different topic, but I will get Justin back on again. Yeah, absolutely.
Old JN,
the man. we do still have, I know Justin does follow naming topics and conventions and stuff too, so that hasn't changed. But yeah, as the lore develops and things move on, but I will leave that for him to speak to when I can get him on next. Alright, so the very last question of the predetermined ones before we open it up to everyone is, Tourke, where do you get some of your inspiration when building a zone like Firthal? So we've kind of touched on this, but this is more specifically the Firthal.
Well, I think for Firthal it's been a lot of, like in the Oldwood portion at least, it's been a lot of like rainforest and stuff that I've been looking at, like on Pinterest or whatever. And then I also have been using a lot of like ArtStation as well. Firthal is made up of a lot of different mini biome type scenarios, so there's a lot of different reference for this type of foliage or that type of foliage, as well as like the architecture of Firthal City. Like there's a lot of things that you can pull from. I just pull from everywhere. I'd say that my favorite place to learn new techniques and to see what other people are doing is this website called artstation.com. I'm on it like all the time, looking at the coolest things people are doing, how they're doing it. They'll post like tutorials and stuff, and yeah, you always got to keep up with what everybody else is doing, make sure that the fans don't get mad.
That's it, man.
There was actually a huge dump on the Jedi. It's Fallen Order. What's the new one?
Yeah.
It's Jedi. Yeah, like there was a huge art dump on that recently, and man, it's just amazing the work that they were doing on there. I didn't play the game, but it looks beautiful.
Good stuff. All right, there's a last question that's kind of popped in. Just for if you guys want to start typing up some real-time questions that we may have missed or you want to hear more on that we're allowed to talk about. And I'll just go over this last one, which is, any chance we could get a revisit stream to the making of Thronefast video to see what it looks like today? It'd be nice to see what the same area looks like today, to see the progress. Might go a long way towards allaying some of the progress. So we will do more kind of making of streams like that. I think they go down really well with the community, and we love doing them as well, showing off our work from where it was to where it is now. As for Thronefast, I'm not too sure specifically of what area. It would be whatever area we're focusing on at the time that we feel we want to show off to everybody. But yeah, that's definitely on the cards to do more.
It's not like we don't want to show it to you.
Well, that's it. The team works incredibly hard on these things, and we can't wait to show them off and get your feedback on it. So it's it's a proud day for us when we can start revealing all this stuff to you guys. So it will definitely be in the future. Just don't have a date for you or when, but when we get to the next zone or have something like that to show off or a making of. But I will pass that on to the team anyway, so we can kind of chuck it on the to-do list. Just can't promise it'll be Thronefast. Alright, so opening it up now to live questions. So if you guys just tag myself and Tourke so we can both see the questions highlighted. Curious about the pipeline that Tourke uses. Do you work low poly to high poly, start with spheres or Dynamesh and then make the low poly, or is it different depending on the asset?
What up, Bronson? Yeah, so it totally depends on the asset. At one point, I showed the old wood tree making of or whatever, like a little bit of a breakdown on it. And at one point, I used Z spheres to create the matrix of meshes or of branches for it. Just something really quick as we're blocking in. I find Z spheres to be super easy. With Dynamesh, often I've ran into issues where I go too high too early. It's so much easier to stay in the silhouette and just, get as broad shapes down as you possibly can. But again, it totally depends on the mesh that you're talking about. Like for the Spriggan, that was definitely like a posing scenario and then sculpting on top of the actual character mesh. And so that was like, that's a completely different pipeline than a rock or sculpting whatever, Yeah,
nice, man. All right, so MMO worlds tend to be static year-round besides a spot for holiday stuff. With being able to change the colour of leaves that are green, can they be turned brown/red in the fall easily in the engine, or will the world remain static visually in that way? So I think he's basically asking if we can change it, for seasons and stuff in game.
It totally depends, but like you technically 100% could. Yeah,
it'd just be a lot of work.
Well, no, not necessarily. Not necessarily, but it depends on what you're wanting to do and how you're wanting to do it for that area. Like technically, you could create a mask that described the location of the leaf on the frond, which would then change color over time. But would that actually look as good as something that had its texture replaced with like a dead looking leaf? And like when you like zone out and zone back in, it's kind of changed a half step in between spring and fall type deal. Like it just depends on how that would be initiated in the engine.
Yeah,
I think that the best result is certainly to replace the texture, but it's totally doable. Just doesn't matter in comparison to some other things.
Yeah, gotcha.
The way, and it is worth noting that that way that I made the texture, the fronds or whatever, you totally could change that leaf really, really quick and then just rebake it, and you'd have a new version. That was one of the things that we talked about on the initial creation of that frond baking tool, was the fact that it's totally iteratable and changeable.
Yeah, nice. Okay, another one from 1ad7. During the last stream with Co, there was a point where he looked over a cliff edge and there was a massive drop-off. Was the area seen below an actual part of the zone that can help someone appreciate the scale of verticality in Firthal?
Yeah, totes.
I love it.
Got him.
Got him. It is a massive zone. I'm trying to think of the actual point that he's talking about.
Technically, like the waterfall right there at the bridge and stuff. Like it's totally technically right there.
Yeah,
part
cool.
of the zone.
Good stuff. All right, so we've still got about 10-15 minutes left, guys. If you want any more questions, feel free to hit us up.
They're over it.
No, they're not over it. We've answered all the good ones for them and can't talk about the other ones, so they're struggling.
Progeny? What?
Yeah, no.
I don't know what he's talking about.
Please no. The community knows how I feel about progeny. We've got like how many threads have been closed and moved, and we will talk about that. When we're going to see some beautiful snow zones. There you go.
It's so interesting because it's hard for me to like piece together all the lore that's visible and invisible to the public. Yeah, I've read so much of it.
Yeah, I know. It's what we've shown publicly and what we've got coming. We do have a zone that has snow in it. The orcs and that we've shown.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's the dwarves for sure in A and B, but I don't know how much snow I can talk about, but there is snow in an area near an area that we're working on right this second.
Yeah. All right, question. What aren't you telling us? That's the laziest attempt to get beans I've ever seen.
Joppa's actually a robot.
Shh, don't tell him that.
He's an artificial intelligence. He's sent to make you good games from the future.
Could we get more concept art items, screenshots, etc. that can be posted on the Pantheon website for wallpapers? So we're looking at... Yeah, we want to, and it is coming. And just a secret shout out for you guys to hound Ronick for that. David, don't tell him I told you, but give him hell. And the team, like my team, the CM team, we're also working on basically like a fan site kit, upgraded kind of fan kit. So I can't give a time for that, but we will have things like that we'll release for the fan sites. We will have, more artwork and stuff in there too, but yeah, just get hassle Ronick.
One thing to note on that is like we are making like time-lapse cameras and stuff for all the areas that we're working on as we're working on them. So yeah,
it's true.
Maybe it might not be shown to you, but the time-lapse is happening. There was a lot of stuff that we didn't show for the Isle that we can show you in the future, and I think like some of it they're like, we'll use that later.
Yeah, that's it.
But when it comes out on the website, it's such a it's a whole thing.
Yeah. And Satori, yeah, man, those 4K screenshots, I miss doing them, man. That was so much fun. I used to run in a game every week and go like 4 to 5 4K screenshots of like places that I thought were awesome, and I'd take like sometimes 10, 20 pictures of the same spot in different angles to try to get it to look right. And then watermark it and then post it as a CM thing. But I was taking so many shots and you guys were loving it so much, the team was like, slow down, because I was running out of areas to take shots of and I was revealing too much. So that's why they stopped. We wanted to leave something to the imagination and show it off in a better way than just me running around and snapping CM screenshots.
Well, with like the proper context, you can show stuff as it's in production. You just have to have that context to lay it in. When we showed the Merc, that was a little bit of a thing that we were wanting to make sure that y'all are cool with seeing this sort of thing so that we can talk more.
Exactly. So we wanted to show it off in a better context rather than me just dumping all these mad screenshots every week and just getting it out there. We'd rather pull back a little bit so we can explain it away. And look, in regards to that, myself, the CM team, we are looking at adding a little bit more visual to some of our posts. So I'll leave that little tease with
you heard it here.
All right, will there be beautiful postcard scenery for fishing spots around the world? Ooh. Well, usually the
Beautiful.
fishing spots are usually nice and serene anyway. Postcard scenery. So...
I mean, I have postcard scenery. I don't know what y'all are using to print yours on, but
we want them to be able to find it themselves too. Like, we want you guys to go in and find these spots and then just go, wow, draw hit the ground, and then take your own screenshots and post them to show.
yeah, I mean, it's like a hero shot, or there's like a bunch of different words for it, I guess you could say, but like that shot cresting over the hill in Sleepless is like the big reveal. It's like this is the place that it's happening. And that's, we're thinking about that ahead of time, I guess you could say, but no postcards.
No.
Not right.
Not yet. All right, so Tourke, will you be the one making the world/zone maps?
Well, that's,
there's a big debate on maps. Just going to quickly preface that with, like,
oh yeah, I guess.
Mini-map and maps in game are kind of like, I think.
I guess I should ask, like, the actual game in the terrain, or are you referring to a map of the terrain in game?
In game map, world map.
So like the geo is what he means, right? You think?
I think they mean opening up an actual atlas, like a map. Which
nah, man, I'm not about that life. That's not me. If we're talking about the actual terrain, the geo, then yeah, we can have a discussion. But
absolutely,
I'm not putting my feet in that water.
Yeah, you don't want to either. All right. Okay, so Sidori's been cheeky. Time to let him get in and take some screenshots of our own. Soon, my friend. Soon. PO5, as soon as we can get that up and ready for you guys, you can go in and... Actually, no, you can't, because you're under NDA, so sorry, that was a tease. How much of the physical art can hide the world? Mobs hiding behind bushes, secret areas behind waterfalls. What's your desire for us as players to push through the art of the world? That's a pretty cool question.
Yeah, I mean, it's a... We totally want them to... Sorry, I just saw that picture.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we really want you to explore and discover and find that thing around the corner that's hidden by, going through a small crack in a rock or whatever. Like, yeah, that's totally...
That's it.
Wouldn't you want to be in that type of game?
Yeah, and we can tie that into the perception system and so many other things. And, what if you're doing PvP and you're just crouching in a bush and you can't be seen to anybody?
Totally.
You see someone run past. Maybe you're hiding for your life. You're not actually trying to ambush. You just know that there's a guild coming and you don't want to die. So you hide in a bush and conceal yourself. Or maybe you're trying to be sneaky. Who knows? But that's
like the new meta to hide in that one tree.
Yeah, so now everyone's got to go check that tree as they run past, just in case there's some poor little person hiding. Alright, so we can't give locations or schedules to work on, like numbers. We don't really have that, but I like how they take it with Bean Hunt. Nice try. Will there be cartography skill then? Not too sure. Possibility. We don't know. It has been discussed, but I just don't know where the team is on that. We understand maps and atlases and mini-maps are hotly debated. We know a lot of people don't want them, and some do want the ability to make their own, so we have taken that information on board, and the team will we'll probably flesh that out a little bit more further down the testing path. Alright, so once the zone is finalised or close enough, how long does it take to finish fleshing it out? Again, that's a kind of open-ended question because it depends on so many other things, but...
Fleshing out or like finish? Because fleshing out would mean like something completely different than... Like finish, I don't really even think that a zone is ever really finished. I like the iteration on stuff as the game grows in age.
Yeah.
It's got to keep developing over time, or the game's like not fun, in my opinion.
Exactly.
But in terms of the initial fleshing out, the population, the assets, all that stuff, Totally depends on each zone.
And for 187, what does this area of the game look like now? We don't really have a screenshot we can show on hand. Can we even talk about that?
No comment.
There's your answer. Alright, so where have we got?
It's a cool area, that area. Did
Yeah.
we say what it was?
No.
Probably not.
Alright, so last question, guys, before we wrap up. How much art is being put into the sky / constellations?
Into the constellation sky. Currently, we're not focusing on our sky domes in our areas because we're focusing on gray boxing and getting like a lot of content for y'all to play in. So, but that question of how the sky is going to look, how like the constellations in the sky, that will totally be addressed, but just later on down the line.
Yeah, sweet. As I said, it's not really a high priority at the moment, but that would be some of the finishing touches and polish that we put on for that immersion and world building stuff at the end.
Water stuff before far away stuff that you can't touch or interact with.
Yeah, that's it. Priorities. All right, so that will do it, guys. We'll wrap it up. I want to say a massive thank you to all of you for staying up late and coming to listen to us no matter what time of day at night it is, and a huge thank you to Jimmy for sparing his time. He's a very busy man, but I appreciate it a lot, man. Thank you.
No problem. Happy to be here.
And on that note, we'll call it here. And yeah, stay tuned for next week, next month. Sorry, not next week. I don't want to tease you that much. Next month, end of March, where I'll have another dev, a new topic, and I'll post that a week before. But until then, it'll be a secret. So thank you very much, guys. We appreciate it. Massive thank you to Jimmy, and I hope you guys have a great weekend. Thanks for coming out.
Thank y'all. Bye.